have a last-minute surprise for you guys today. Today's episode is the return of Self-Worth Sam yet again, but this time we're kind of switching things up a little bit. We didn't mean for this to happen, but this episode, he actually interviews me. He had some questions. We'd gotten to know each other a little bit when I interviewed him previously on my podcast, but he wanted to know more. So he asked. And as always, I was open to answering. This is a very special episode of Self-Worth Sam Returns for the third interview.
Hey, Amanda. Great to hear you again. How's things with you?
Whew, busy, but really good. Really good. I just signed up for Podmatch, I want to say 2 weeks ago now. And my podcast is now booked up almost to the end of the year.
Look at you go. Well done. Well done. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, maybe you're thinking, maybe that's not all good.
Yeah, there is some of that in there. I'm going to be busier than a one-legged man in a butt kicking contest.
I love that metaphor. That is bringing good images.
Better hold on to something that's going to get rough.
Well, I tell you what, I was on a podcast this morning 2 hours ago with a guy from Florida, and I've got another one tonight at 8:30 p.m. with a woman who's in Czech Republic.
Oh my, I hope you get a nap in between.
Oh, I've got no naps scheduled, just work.
Oh man.
So maybe there's a touch of regret of me pitching so much. Pitching to podcast hosts, but I love it. What am I saying?
Yeah, there's just those days though where it's just it gets to be a bit much. Ready for a break.
You know what? You got to schedule them in, and as much as we love to pursue our value and our dreams, I think rest and health and downtime, if we like, is a healthy and wise choice. Yes.
I've actually started scheduling in some exercise routines now, which has been hugely helpful for me to just, it's on the calendar. I have to do this.
Does that include walking to the letterbox?
Little bit more than that, but not much. No, I've been going out and walking for about 3 miles a day. And then coming back and doing like a half-hour routine just here in the house, just, physical fitness stuff, basics. And it helps. It gets the blood flowing and it gets my brain actually functioning better. I sleep better at night, and it's just been really nice.
Beautiful. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I would like to go for a walk today, but it is raining.
Oh.
So unless I put on I'll take the umbrella maybe and go. Yeah. But it is a nice wet one today. Oh my gosh.
Well, as long as it's not thunder and lightning, you're safe with the umbrella, right?
True.
Yeah. I've made that mistake a couple of times and had people yell at me. Never walk in the rain if it's thunder and lightning when you're carrying a metal rod in your hands.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a science experiment waiting to go wrong. Hey, tell me how's things going with the speaking tour?
I am booked for speaking at a church. It's about 1,000 miles away from here on the last day of April. So that'll be a nice trip for my husband and I just to, get in the car and drive down there.
Your life sounds fantastic.
It does sometimes, doesn't it? But it's amazing. There was a podcast interview that I was on that just aired as of today, this morning. And one of the things that we were talking about was perceptions. And just because it appears like I have everything all put together and I've got this incredible life, it doesn't mean that's always the case, because there are days where getting out of bed is still a struggle just because of the past that I've had and trauma brain and that kind of stuff. It's very real. So perception is reality to some people, what they perceive to be true.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you and say that there's only three things that we can control. That's our perceptions, our thoughts, and behavior. But perceptions is really where it comes down to. And you said a very important thing there, like how people perceive us to have it all together. And that's really a one-sided story. And they don't see the days or the days from your past where it was the complete opposite, where you didn't
Right.
have it all together and you would actually prefer to forget some of those things. And yeah, it's wise to look at both sides of other people's stories to have an objective comparison rather than a one-sided fantasy about other people's lives and how much better they could be than yours, and resent your own and wish you had theirs. But if we only just found out the other side to their story, we would go, actually, I'm kind of happy with my own.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And then we can look at our own life and can go, okay, a lot of people look at their life and think, oh, it's terrible. It's got all these things in here. It's like, well, look for the positives and balance it up so that you can have an objective view. That's a more authentic approach to perception and self-worth. If you want to raise it, is to look at both sides and attempt to appreciate the positive and negative, and see how that's assisted you to become the person you are today.
Yes. Yeah, I love all of that. So many of us judge other people based on what we see on social media too. And people aren't going to talk about their heartbreaks and their bad days. They're going to focus on only posting about the good stuff. So you don't see it when somebody's really struggling.
Yeah.
You know?
Fortunately, there are some people who do show both sides, and I think that's a really healthy thing.
Yes.
But essentially, the Instagram filters or TikTok filters or just the thing that you actually post is a snapshot, a really small snapshot of some person's life, and then we create a story around it based off 30 seconds, and
Right.
then we compare ourselves and usually minimize ourselves in comparison to this small interpretation of some stranger somewhere in the world. And uh, it's it's not very wise, and it doesn't do a whole lot for our self-worth.
Right. And it's not even necessarily the strangers either. I have a friend of mine that just went on a cruise with her husband's family not too long ago. And I felt myself looking at these photos of them playing on the beach and hanging out and going, man, I'm so jealous. I wish that could be me. And then I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, no, stop that. Look at what you're doing right now. Look at what you're focusing on and achieving right this minute, and realize that she's going on this vacation with her husband's family because her husband's family is paying for it. They
Mm-hmm.
can't afford this.
Mm.
There's no way they could do this on their own. And she's had so many struggles in her life. She absolutely has earned the right to go out and have a little fun with her family.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. You're right.
yep.
Many people see these little snapshots of happy families, and it kind of reminds me of like a commercial on TV where there's white linen and happy families with perfect teeth, and that it's like, yeah, right. It's just like, well, that's a completely fabricated um, image of reality, and everybody knows that life is a series of ups and downs. In fact, I had there was a guy who I wrote a book with many years ago. He's the computer scientist from Austria, Dr. Hermann Maurer, and he is the dean of a university in Austria. And he said, if a year goes by and you haven't experienced a series of ups and downs, you haven't really lived.
Wow.
Which is a realistic approach. And you go, you know what? You kind of want the challenges, you want the support, you want a bit of a balance. You don't want all challenge, because then you
Right.
just become depressed and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't overcome anything. But you don't want total support where you get coddled and sheltered to the point that everything's done for you and you stagnate in your growth. And you want to remember the age old principle that maximum growth occurs at the balance between challenge and support.
Very well put. That's beautiful.
I mean, if you look at biology, we have homeostasis, and it's a constant juggle of trying to bring balance to just our body. And if we have challenge and support going on in there, if we work out, that's kind of stressing our muscles, but it's actually called eustress. EU stress is good stress, as opposed to distress, which is the opposite when we stress out for let us say negative things. But I think we want a bit of both to grow.
Yeah, yeah. And if we don't grow, we feel really stagnant. We just sit there and feel like we're wasting our life and wasting our time, and there has to be something more. It's a perfectly natural reaction to sit there and look for more.
Yeah.
Which is also really bizarre for trauma survivors, because a lot of us just want to sit stagnant. We want something that seems the same every single day for a while, at least, just to have some sense of normalcy.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah. But when we climb out of that hole and we're no longer living in the middle of the trauma and trying to deal with the different stages of trauma, the first thing we're going to do is go look for something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why I became a flight
right.
attendant. I hated sitting around and doing nothing and feeling like I would never go anywhere for the rest of my life. And I was lucky to be alive. And why am I not taking advantage of living? So I became a flight attendant.
Are you able to look back at those days when you were stagnant with a new appreciation, as a way of seeing it as the cause for inspiring you to get up and go be a flight attendant?
In a way, yes.
Would you be able to say that you would have become a flight attendant if you had not been in that stagnant position?
That's where it starts getting tough. When I became a flight attendant, it was less than a year after I had gotten out of trafficking. I hadn't even gotten to the point yet where I was in full acceptance of understanding of what it was that I'd been through.
Mm-hmm.
What I was looking for that first year was distractions. I needed things to keep me busy, not sitting on my hands every night at home after working a job and feeling
ruminating.
Right. I didn't want to think about what had happened. I needed other things to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided that I was going to do everything I could to keep myself alive, because I was incredibly damaged and depressed, and I had no interest in staying alive. So I knew I needed to work hard at it.
So you had a significant amount of challenge, which led to where you are right now, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was a flight attendant for 2 years, 3 months, 28 days. Not that I was counting. Um, and
How many
it
countries?
was only three. It was a regional airline. So I flew into Canada, Mexico, and all over the US. But
That's more travel than most people have ever done.
right. And I've been to 48 of 50 states.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a really amazing adventure. I miss being a flight attendant. I don't miss the stress that it put my body through, and I don't miss the inability to have a functional relationship. I couldn't
these are
be
the
a flight
downsides of it.
attendant. Oh yeah, I
So
couldn't be a flight attendant now.
you got a amazing sense of travel and distraction, as you said you needed at the time, and that was the upsides. However, the downsides are, you just said, health factors, relationship factors. So
Yeah.
a lot of time people say, "Oh, flight attendant, that'd be amazing." It's like, well, there is also some drawbacks.
Oh
So
yeah.
you've learned to see it objectively, and that makes you wise.
Well, and that first year, I thankfully had a an adopted family that really wanted to support me in my recovery, and they were helping me out with rent every month. I wouldn't have been able to afford that as a flight attendant. My first year on the job, I made approximately $12,000 for the entire year, and that was working full time. That's not a livable wage, especially when I was stationed out of LAX and flying to in and out of Los Angeles every time. And I had to live there. You don't have the option when you're that new of living in a different city. I couldn't afford rent. I could
Mm-hmm.
barely afford food, even with somebody else paying my rent.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep,
yeah, that
I can
was,
appreciate what that must be like. Been to LAX a handful of times, and just going there is chaos.
oh, yeah.
It's a hell of an airport, and you really need to practice your meditation and your mindfulness. It's like cars everywhere, people everywhere, flights, gates, and you worked there, so you actually were serving while you were there and having to look professional and keep it together, as well as how many hours would your shift been that you've been flying around and dealing with the public and who are not always so nice on the plane, I'm betting.
Right.
So
They were definitely those days.
the hellish side of the LAX.
Yeah, it was. There's constantly some kind of construction going on. I
Oh yeah.
was there when there was a shooting at the airport, and one of the security officers at Terminal 3, I believe, was shot and killed.
Mm.
I mean, there was constantly something happening. And when I was new, I was on call. And being on call, I had to be able to be completely dressed, ready to go, with my bag packed and everything settled and situated, and all 7 of my required items in hand before getting to the airport. And I had to be at the airport in less than 2 hours when I was on call.
That's no small feat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I live 45 minutes away. So I
Wow.
was, I needed to haul butt to be able to do
I
that
bet.
job.
Wow. Wow.
But it was so
An
absolutely
adventure
worth
for
it.
sure.
Oh yeah, it
It
was
was
worth
worth
it.
it. Tell me more about why it was worth it in your mind, and what your opinion.
It definitely kept me alive. It gave me a sense of not just belonging, but exploration. One of my greatest fears, especially with everything that I've been through, is going someplace that I've never been before if I'm alone.
Hmm.
And becoming a flight attendant, I had to force myself to face this fear and so many others too, and really push myself to do things that I would never do otherwise, but also to see things that I would never otherwise see. Went to a lot of different cities, and most of the flight crews, when they got there, um, they would go into their rooms, and we call them slam clicks. They
Hmm.
would slam their door and click the lock, and you wouldn't see them again until your plane took off.
Good word for it. Slam click.
Right. But
Yeah.
I refuse to do that. It's like, I'm terrified of going these places and being out there on my own. But what I'm more afraid of now, because of what I've lived through, is not living my life.
Hmm.
So it was one or the other. And flying into Seattle, I think it was 14 hours of an overnight. 8 of that was supposed to be for sleeping. And I ended up going into the heart of Seattle and seeing the original Starbucks, and going to the marketplace where they throw the fish around. And I went to the Space Needle there in Seattle. I mean, I got to see all of this stuff. I picked up souvenirs, little fridge magnets and coffee mugs in all these different cities. I did these things that, if I hadn't been through the stuff that I'd been through, I never would have had the courage to go do these things. I never would have seen this part of the world.
With that insight, are you able to appreciate your past in a new light? To and not to say that your past was positive, but to say that it caused a balancing effect in your life
Oh
to
yeah.
heal and to find your purpose, or to find your authenticity, to empower you.
Yes, absolutely. I've been through so much stuff. And looking back, I know that I was always the strong person that could get out of it and that could survive. But when it was happening at the time, I didn't know this about myself.
Of course.
Um, so I had to do all of this research, not just on who am I, but on the effects of trauma and the effects of healing and how do we get there from here and all of this stuff. And that has definitely given me this sense of purpose and power. And I know my life's mission now, and it's to help other people to get through it.
Interesting that you are a human trafficking survivor, and the solution for your healing was to, in a way, travel, which is, I mean, human trafficking is a kind of moving people around, right?
There's a
And
common
then you,
misconception there. That's actually human smuggling. Trafficking, if you look at the definition of trafficking in Google, it's the sale of goods, right? Like drugs, like
mhm,
guns. Trafficking is typically, even though it sounds like traffic like you would see on a road, it typically doesn't have anything to do with the movement of people. It has everything to do with the sale of people.
mhm. I was just thank you for that clarification. I just thought that there might be an insight of how if you are being sold and sometimes moved around between people, that
Yeah.
the healing could have been come from you deciding to move yourself around or to put yourself into service in a way that was balancing and healing, which was flight attendant and traveling.
Yeah. Yep.
Just throwing out ideas here.
One of the common trauma reactions that people have after they've been through something like this. I know you've heard the fight, flight, or freeze
Yeah. Yeah.
scenarios, but a lot of flight attendants, a lot of human trafficking survivors go through either the please phase or the fawn phase, which the please is you're willing to do whatever it takes to please this person because your
Mm-hmm.
life might depend on it,
Yeah.
and that typically later on manifests as people pleasing.
Yep.
And that's a huge necessity when you're a flight attendant. So, one of the things that I started to notice when I was a flight attendant is that pretty much every single flight attendant that I worked with had been through trauma.
Hmm.
It was fascinating. I started to want to know why. Why does this work the way it does? Why do we all want to become flight attendant? It's because we know what it takes to please some very difficult people, and we take it as a challenge, and it becomes a fun game to us, which is just bizarre and kind of twisted.
Interesting that you were talking about flight or fight response, and then you end up a flight attendant.
Right.
It's almost like if you're in a state of adrenaline or flight, that's an attempt to escape, and then flight attendant is perhaps a more constructive way of using that flight adrenaline to your advantage to escape. So
Yeah.
at least I'm just thinking in terms of healing or finding something that is grounding, even though you are in the air most of the time.
Right. And there's an interesting connection there too, because when I went to Scotland before I knew what was going to happen, um, I was a terrible flyer. I was a white knuckle flyer. I hated being on airplanes, and I was not a fan. And when I left there, the day that I got on the flight to leave, I remember thinking how glad I was to be climbing onto an airplane. It was the first time in my life I'd ever been really that happy and glad rather than nervous and scared, because I knew that that plane meant my salvation. And I think I linked a lot of my internal emotions to that feeling of freedom of being on that plane.
Yeah.
And I think I felt that every time I went to work too, for that 2 years, 3 months, 28 days.
Wow. Wow. Now, you said before that ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, that being you call yourself a victim or a survivor of human trafficking?
A
Which one is it?
survivor. Yep.
Okay, so would you be able to say that being a survivor of human trafficking has led to discovering your mission in life?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a huge part of it for me. So when I got out of there, I would have been perfectly happy to hide for the rest of my life. It was the repeated attempts of attacking me afterward that made me fight back. I would have chopped off my hair and changed my hair color and hidden for the rest of my life otherwise. It was in 2019 that I discovered, because of a friend of mine, that a bunch of photos and videos of me had been put up on different pornography websites from my time being trafficked and abused, with links to find me on social media. And I kind of panicked when I found out about it, and I wanted to go into hiding then. And instead, I found a law firm that specialized in helping human trafficking survivors. And they helped me by starting to take this down. But every time they'd take something down, more would go up. So I finally said, you know what? I'm sick of this. I am not going to be hiding from this anymore. No matter what I seem to do, I can't seem to fight it. But if people are going to keep finding me, they need to know why they're finding me. They need to know who this is that's sharing this with them and what a depraved, nasty person this is.
Mm-hmm.
So I started openly talking about it. If he hadn't continually tried to attack me, I would not have turned this direction in life.
And now, as a result, you get to serve and help others to become survivors.
Right. Right. He created the monster that I have become in fighting him.
Oh, is monster the right word?
It might be to him.
Quite likely. Well, I'm inspired by who you are and your mission, and it's clear that you are going to bring an incredible amount of value and healing to the world.
Thank you. I hope so.
I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice. You've got an incredible strength and authenticity. And yeah, you sound like a person whose heart is big.
Thank you. My husband says I have a big heart, but I guess some days I struggle to see it. I think it's because, for the most part, we don't really analyze ourselves in such ways.
Well, there's your next challenge. Love thyself.
Recognize myself, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
because I do love myself, but
good. Now, we had a topic that we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, we should probably get on that. I think we might have 2 episodes here, Sam.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all this has been great so far.
Yeah. I feel like you just interviewed me, though. I love it.
You're very really welcome. Cool. I was very interested to know a little bit more, and I'm coming from a place of service myself, and I'm always interested to hear where others are coming from, and especially people who have found their mission. So thank you.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. There you're going to find links on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that I work for myself. In short, this show really is all about the guest. If you've enjoyed their interview, please feel free to let them know. You can also tune into my other podcast, Growth from Darkness, which is co-hosted by a lovely lady from Australia. We talk about what trauma responses are and healthy ways to move beyond the past. For more information, just go to growthfromdarkness.com.